It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing very good. How are you?
No, not bad. Just got off the road for like 2 weeks.
Well, I have exciting news, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to go see octogenarians play a rock concert.
Oh, what, it was ACDC, right?
Yes. As soon as I said they're not quite octogenarians, to be fair, but they're almost octogenarians. So I want to see how somebody's great grandfather can get up there and sing Highway to Hell. I'm really excited to see it happen. And what I heard rather, is that they take long breaks between every song, not just, like their days off between every show, but like after every song, there's like a minute because they just, grandpa can't do it, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard, man. You need a breather. I guess, what would you rather do? What would you rather see? Them go hard for 3.5 minutes, take a 2 minute break, and then reboot after 5 minutes? Or would you rather them stay at sort of a low, medium simmer and maintain their energy through the entire show?
I would rather them take a break and be ACDC
Yeah, I think so
because
too.
it's not this. You don't want to see like a shadow, a shell of their former selves. Particularly and I've always thought it, once these bands just can't do it, they need to stop. They really ought to. I mean, some of them can't afford it and all that, but ACDC has all the money in the world. They've got the second biggest selling album in history. They don't need the money. None of them do. So yeah, I'd rather them take a break and be ACDC. In a stadium show, Angus Young's running around like a madman, literally sprinting. Brian Johnson is running around. So I don't blame him. I just hope it's not overly awkward.
Now, Brian Johnson, I mean, they used guest vocalists and this has been now 3 or 5 years ago, I think, but they have used guest vocalists that came in subbed on different tours. And he sort of seems like he's taken a couple-year break. Do you think he's recovered his vocal cords?
Supposedly he has, as much as you can recover as compared to when you were 40 and originally recorded these songs. I mean, the guy's old, but I heard him interviewed 2 years ago about it, and it was the damage, I think, was not just typical I'm old and I've been screaming. It was something specific, that like some specific medical
Yeah, he
thing
like
that
injured them.
yeah, somehow that he has recovered from. So I don't think he's going to be the same as when they were in the 80s, but I think supposedly he's pretty good.
Yeah, I actually think that to me that's a positive sign because if he actually just took the time to recover, then yes, he's going to be 75 or whatever he is. But
He's more than that. He's like 78 or something.
so
75 is a young man for him.
pushing 80. But if they just road dogged this whole time and it just got worse and worse. But actually healing, taking a break, it may mean you get a kind of a composite better performance.
Yes. And nobody wants to see a guest vocalist. I mean, let's be real. I mean, even Axl Rose, who is a horrible live, by the way, incidentally, the man has never been able to sing. He certainly can't do it now, but nobody wants to see Axl Rose sitting in a chair on the stage doing ACDC songs. That isn't the same thing at all.
No, that was dumb. Although I think at the time it was like Brian Johnson had to leave the tour, like
It
so
was
it was like they
because
had
of
to.
this vocal thing.
Yeah, so they probably had contraction. It wasn't like they started a tour with guest vocalists. They just
No,
had
no,
to
no, no,
finish the
no.
legs.
Yeah, they probably had contractual
Yeah.
obligations that they would lose money if they didn't fulfill or something. I mean, I get it, but still, that's not ideal. It's like, like notice Aerosmith has essentially retired
Yeah.
because you don't want to replace Steven, like a monstrous personality like Steven Tyler, with somebody else.
No, what would be the point? Now Malcolm Young is deceased, right?
That the new rhythm guitarist is a cousin. There's an endless supply of guitar playing Youngs. Apparently, Stevie Young is the guitarist. And
What?
here's the best part though. The normal drummer, Phil Rudd, is not on this tour in America. You know why? He has not been able to get a visa. If you would care to know why he can't get a visa, it's because he lived the reality of the song "Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap" and got convicted of some of crimes involving him trying to hire a hitman to kill some woman.
Nice.
I mean, he literally lived the song. That's what the song 30 Deeds Done Dirt Cheap is about, is hiring a hitman to kill a girlfriend. That's what he did, apparently. I mean, talk about living out the rock star lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, uh, yeah, they can replace him easy enough. Now, you know that the
Nobody's going to
young,
care what drummer it is. No.
you mentioned the endless supply of youngs, but do you know that neither Angus or Malcolm was actually even the wasn't the first, almost kind of like hugely successful young brother?
Uh, well, I mean, are you talking about Crosby, Stills, Nash, and
No, no, no,
Young?
no. I'm talking about their literal brother.
Oh, no, no, you're going to fool me with ACDC trivia. Go ahead.
So their older brother is named Alex Young. Now, Alex Young was in a band called the Easybeats, which were like post Beatles. They were Australian. They actually moved to London, and they're most known. They had a couple hits actually, but they're most known for the song "Friday on My Mind." I got Friday on my mind. Doo-doo-doo-doo. So they're called the Easy Beats, and like I said, they were like a Australia's British invasion. Had I think Friday on My Mind was like a big hit in the U.S., and then they had a second song that actually In Excess later covered and had a hit with in the '80s.
What was that?
I
Do you
got
remember?
now. I got to gonna have a good time or something like that. I can look it up.
Oh, okay.
And he then that kind of that era of music ended. He went back to Australia and put his brothers together and then helped create and manage ACDC.
I have never heard this before. You just taught me something. That song you cited, Friday on My Mind, kind of sort of sounds vaguely familiar a little bit, like I've heard it somewhere.
Yeah, if you listen to 3 hours of oldies radio, not classic rock now, because now they consider like Bon Jovi classic rock, but if you listen to oldies radio, which is still like 50s, 60s based, and you listen to it for 2.5 hours, I guarantee you'd hear Friday on My
Yeah,
Mind.
classic rock used to be the Stones and the Doors.
Yeah, I tried listening to it now, and it's like
It's
Warrant.
Warrant. Yeah, exactly. They play it's Warrant. I don't know what happened. I still want to hear the Stone. I like Warrant, but I'd like to hear the Stones and the Doors, and I can't.
Right, yeah, truth in advertising. So
No, I
there you
think we're
go.
just getting old. That's what it is. Because when we were kids, the Stones and the Doors were 20 years oldish, and now Warrant is 30 years
Yeah,
old.
I know it's scary the difference in years for sure. But yeah, so the young family
There's
in
another
rock and roll
guitar
is
playing
deep.
young. There's
Yeah,
another guitar playing. I didn't know that.
yeah, and it's funny because he actually was instrumental. He was the kind of older brother brains behind ACDC, and he had been through it. He'd gone through the whole thing already. He'd been a hit and touring band, world tours. Moved to a big city, blah blah blah.
So he's probably in his 80s. So because
I am even not even sure he's alive.
Angus Young is not as nearly as old. Angus
No, he's
is like,
younger. Yeah.
yeah, he started really young when ACDC started. So I want to say he's like 71 or so. He's practically a spring chicken compared to Brian Johnson.
Well, we will get the. Where are
We'll
you
get
seeing them?
at Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium,
Well,
which
we
is
will
a
get the
long
scene
story.
report.
Yeah, the bottom line is somebody who wanted to go to the show had to see Vegas, so I'm forced to go to Vegas again.
Well, there you go. Well, no, don't. I was about to read you the Wikipedia on Easybeats, but maybe we'll put it in the show notes. Speaking of stadiums and stadium tours, Washington Commanders made some news, and maybe you can go see, a stadium show here sometime after 2030. But it looks like we are getting not there, not even anywhere near a finish line, but we are starting to get through some important hurdles in a move back to the RFK site for the Commanders with a deal in principle, let's call it, between Washington D.C. and Josh Harris.
I don't know if it's even a deal in principle. It's progress, but I don't think they even have a deal in
The
principle.
constructs of the deal.
There's a basic framework. So NBC Washington reported this. There's a story called DC's Commanders close to $3 billion deal for new stadium and RFK site by Mark Seagraves, dated the 16th, updated April 17th. Okay, so basically what they're reporting here is that the Washington team, because I don't use the C word unless I have to, the Washington team um, is negotiating with DC for a stadium, and they've made some specific progress. Apparently, the team has agreed or is has offered to put up 2.5 billion in development costs, and the district has agreed to put up 850 million. Now, when I we talked about this very briefly last week on the Hawks site, and I was really surprised that the team was willing to do that. But the more I thought about it over the past couple of days, the more I realized that the locales have always put up about 800 million. In recent years, it's the cost of stadiums that have gone so far up. There aren't a lot of stadiums in which recent football stadiums that the local governments have put up billions of dollars for, nor should they. So it's more like the team, because they have no choice, is eating far more of the development costs than they would have even 10 years ago. And how this, so this is basically now, if you recall the federal law that got passed, in which authorized the district to control the land, said that federal money could not be put into stadium development costs. So the 850 million basically goes into infrastructure, because the federal government builds a lot of infrastructure. And so basically the entire stadium itself is going to be the responsibility of Josh Harris and his investors to fund. Yes, I was very surprised at first, but more I thought about it, I think the less surprised I get about this. Your thoughts?
It happened like the framework of the deal
I
happened a
don't
little.
even know if they have an agreement in principle. Just you got to understand. People need to understand that they've reported that this is a discussion. There's nothing in writing. There, it doesn't even seem to be an LOI. What was reported was that they are in talks essentially.
But even that halfway house type of place is faster than I expected it.
Yeah,
And I think it's notable that, well, the Josh Harris group. And a little known thing that some people haven't reported in the story is, just like we have, well, not we, but they'll have to, the powers that be here that want this deal to be completed, will have to mollify local community residents, and that's already begun a pushback there. And they've been clear for years they don't want a new stadium there. Some, kind of NIMBY groups there, and city council. So those, here's some of the very real hurdles. But I think an underreported story is that Josh Harris is also going to have to convince his 932 co-owners that ponying up what 2/3 of the cost of the stadium is a wide investment after already ponying up at the time the biggest record for any sports franchise. And I give the Harris Group all the credit in the world. They've turned this thing around pretty fast, but there's still a lot of rot that has to get sorted through. So it's no guarantee that he convinces his large ownership group that this is a wise use of funds.
yeah. So maybe he's come to the reality that no matter where a stadium is built, be it DC, Virginia, or Maryland, they were going to have to put up a lot of money on their own. Maybe that's the story, because
I agree.
it's, again, in years past, yes, the bulk of financing for stadiums has been put up by local governments. The two stadiums I worked on, that was the case. I was by no means the sole attorney. There's an army of attorneys do stuff like this, but I was involved in two of them. But that was a long time ago, and costs were a lot less then. Again, like no local government has agreed to put up 2.5 or $3 billion to build a stadium. That's just not a thing. It's not an effective use of government funds. This isn't the highest and best use of land, no, typically. And so the more I thought about it, the more I think maybe what Maryland has offered him isn't substantially different, even if it is a little bit more. I mean, ideally, you'd want the stadium in DC for nostalgia reasons, particularly at the RFK site, for those of you who can buy into this expansion team having a connection to the Redskins, which some people do, some people don't. So it doesn't surprise me, I guess, that much. Once I kind of came back down to earth about it, I think this is probably what always is going to happen.
Yeah, and even all things being equal, even nostalgia aside, and well, who cares? Uh, you want your stadium in a or within a city rather than the exurbs by default, right? So, like, I think so. I mean,
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that in
well,
all cases.
maybe not in all cases, but I think this one especially because that area where Northwest Field is now, that's a lot of building out and infrastructure that Maryland would have to do. I'm not even talking about costs. I'm just talking about there aren't many things out there like that would be around the RFK.
Well, oh, that brings me to another point here, by the way. So this is going to be a mixed use development, apparently, um, meaning that there's going to be other commercial development around it. I shouldn't say mixed use. I don't see anything about housing in here, but there'll be commercial development associated with this that the team's investment group is going to do. And so that means presumably bars and restaurants and whatnot. Now, this is only 180 acres, okay? That is, believe it or not, not a ton of space to do something like this. I wrote a story, I don't know, a couple months ago about this, and I looked up some sizes for other stadium developments. And if you take the ultimate example of this is Stan Kroenke and SoFi in Los Angeles. That is the NFL's and the country's premier stadium development, like 350 acres. Um, but others are a lot smaller. So 180 acres, I would think they're going to have to do something about parking if they want significant commercial development around it. So I don't know if that means Alex Zeese on the Hogs. I seem to think, or he had read somewhere they might have parking garages. That might be the only way to go because it's
Yeah,
not a
that
ton of space.
because they've already started to float the fact that tailgating may be a sacrifice here because they'll need parking
That
garages.
might be where he got.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where he got it then, because I just don't know how they could do parking in a stadium and have commercial development on only 180 acres.
No,
Um,
I think it's parking garage is a lock.
and of course, the problem is parking garages are expensive. That just raises the cost even more. Um, so the interesting part about that then is clearly, um, the DC doesn't have fee simple title to the property. They essentially have what amounts to a federal ground lease from the federal government to this, and so um, Harris is only doing the commercial development because he's making money on it. So then there's going to be like a sub ground lease or some sort of, you know, um, you know, agreement wherein they will split the rights and split the income or something along those lines. Because he's not doing this for free. So I think also people need to be ready and aware that there's going to be PSLs, personal seat licenses. The cost will go dramatically up. This is not going to be will not come without a significant rise in cost because you said it right. I mean, Josh Harrison is 872 investors have already spent more than $6 billion. Now they're going to spend another 2.5 billion. That has got to be repaid somehow.
Oh, yeah, that's a given. I do think it's interesting though that we see a trend here, and read a couple analysis that basically said this is very similar to the Buffalo Bills recent stadium deal in terms of owner, municipality share, basic numbers, all those things. It looks very similar, and it's a better deal than the Tennessee Stadium deal, which was also more recent. So it's a better deal for the town for the city than Tennessee is ponying up more money, but it looks a lot like the Bills deal. And I think this is a trend where I think the appetite for public funding for stadiums is nosediving for a whole host of reasons. And basically cities are ponying up for whatever mixed use infrastructure that probably maps to some of the things that they want to do or need to do anyway. And then that you get in this to 2/3 1/3 split with basically the municipalities saying we'll make that area usable and whatever that means for that area, but the owners are footing most of the bill, especially for the direct stadium costs.
Well, there's a limit to how much a local government can fund. It's not a state. It's not the federal government can toss around billions like as we've seen over decades. It toss around billions like it's couch cushion money. But local governments, once you get past a few $100 million, it's really tough for them, how, because they can issue bonds to probably raise some money, but those got to be repaid back, and they just can't take on $3 billion and ruin their budget. And so I think we've kind of hit the limit of what a local government can do, and that's what we're seeing here. And the other thing is, I think the public has woken up far more than they have before in years past about how much money public funds, local, especially local money, should be handed to a billionaire football team owner. So I think there's that, but I think it's just we've hit the limit of what a local government can fund. I know this. I can tell you, I've been involved in it directly. You get past a few hundred million, and it's just almost impossible without just ruining the local budget.
So, but I think we've been
Especially
putting
DC, which has federal government overlords and all of that.
we've been putting hurdles in front of this now for years. They just seem to just to straddle them. I do see this happening. I think the momentum is there. I think this gets done.
I do too, and the reason also is the talk with DC and Maryland, with Virginia and Maryland, have like gone away.
Yeah, they've really
Virginia
quieted.
died a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's a
Maryland,
non-starter. I don't think.
and Maryland's just kind of gone, radio silent too. So I think this seems to be. I don't think this story is an accident. Number one, and number two, I think this is the only talks they're really having. And I do think to have in the DC area to have a stadium centrally located at a minimum is good. If you put a stadium way out and, Falls or just what Centerville almost or somewhere, it's too far out. They're going to be known as the Virginia Redskin or Virginia, team or whatever. And Maryland, it's, too close to Baltimore. I think DC is probably right. I'm not necessarily buying into the nostalgia part of it because to me, the team is dead. So I don't buy that part of it. But I know there's some fans that like this nostalgia of the RFK side. I think it's pointless, that part of it.
Yeah, I think you're probably in the minority on that one.
Well, it's just to me, it's not the same team at all. It's a expansion team to me.
Yeah, but I just don't. I think especially.
I'm in the minority. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, and if they can get this right, if they, we the narrative over the 15 or 20 years has been that these are usually bad deals for the cities. That they
It's
don't.
still not a great deal for the city. It's still $850 million they're fronting.
Right, but when they're not on the hook for building the actual thing and they do build downtown value, some of the recent sort of urban planning studies that where the city stays within some kind of range and can make the case that they would have probably paid 2/3 of those costs regardless in infrastructure upgrades, they are starting to have positive economic impact. And DC is actually a positive story there because at the time, I guess was the MCI Arena, now is Capital One. That was a successful turnaround story for those neighborhoods that the Wizards Caps Stadium is.
I mean, the highest and best use of land would typically be commercial or residential development, not a stadium that's going to be vacant, 350 days a year, I would say. So I don't necessarily think this is the very best thing they could have done with the land. But certainly, I mean, getting someone else to pay for development, most of the development is a good thing, if that's what your point is. So
yeah, and that's what the homes not stadiums is already the name of the community based opposition group.
Yeah, but they've been doing this for a while. We're going on at least a decade of this.
Well, yeah, because they fought a soccer stadium there. I mean, yeah, right. This has been a thing for yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's NIMBY. And NIMBY means not in my backyard. For those of you wondering, that's a typical development term, that we see. I see a lot when locals don't want something built.
Yeah, anything from a landfill to a stadium.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And last thing I'll say in this is that the NBC Washington story reported that the district's investment will be paid in installments. The first 500 million paid out between 2026 and 2030, and then the other 350 million paid back in 2032 through taxes generated from the new development. And so my guess here is that probably Josh Harris is on the hook to front all of it, and then the local government will probably reimburse them with infrastructure costs up to 500 million, and then get the rest of it back later. That's sort of what they're implying here.
I think it really does show, even if the Harris Group is willing for these numbers to get out there now, which if they're out there now means they're willing to have them out there
That's
now.
why I think this story isn't an accident.
Yeah, and that shows you how committed he is to getting this done.
And I think, and I do think, I mean, yes, I realize I'm in a minority about, my views of the team and everything, but I do think he, I think part of the reason why this is leaked is I do think the ownership group wants to make people feel slightly better about the past of the team, because they really, the one thing he's done a great job with the franchise, obviously, but one thing he's not done a great job in is honoring the past. They've ignored the past. They've they really don't talk about the Redskins at all. And so I think part of the whole we're going back to the RFK site story is trying to tap into the nostalgia of it in a way that they haven't done. They've done a very poor job to date.
I don't know if I agree with that. I agree with your major point. I think they've done a better job than you're giving them credit for. I was in the stadium this year, and you saw old Redskins helmets and players on two-story walls everywhere.
Okay, well, fair enough. But I mean, it's for me, it seems like they haven't, but I could be
But
wrong.
doesn't matter. Quibbling on the edges is not only kind of illustrates the point that he has a needle to thread here, and I do agree that
I think
doing something like this is that.
my larger point is
Yes, I
valid.
agree.
Yeah, oh, fair enough.
Mileage may vary, but I mean, that's a line he's got to carefully walk.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, all right, so put the stadium deal and billionaires behind us, or certain kinds of billionaires, I guess. The one specific billionaire and
We'll
his
go to other billionaires.
team of merry men is some lot of sports business baseball news coming out. Kind of like one, CNBC is done their valuations of all Major League Baseball teams. We've got a Major League Baseball team for sale right now. They're kind of kind of put against those valuations and sort of stress tested a little bit. And then we've even though the lockout wouldn't come or the contract doesn't run out till December of 2026, the saber rattling has already begun about the terms of the new deal. All this is wrapped up, into where is baseball with its financial health? It's kind of a glass half full, half empty scenario, which we've hit on a number of times. You can make an equal case for full empty, but the valuations is where we start. And man, is there just such a discrepancy between the haves and have-nots.
Yeah, I realize we've done a lot of valuation stories recently, but this is super interesting and it's a great comparison. So the CNBC story is CNBC's official team valuations 2025. Here's how 30 franchises stack up by Michael Ozanian, who we seem to be talking about every single week on this show. So the average, according to the CNBC, which is not the same as Forbes, and
they all have their own formulas,
right? Yeah, but 2.62 billion is the average. However, the reason why this is the average is that they've got the Yankees at 8 billion, the Dodgers at 5.8 billion, Red Sox at 4.7, Cubs at 4.5. That's four teams over 4 billion. One team really stands above the rest, and then the Dodgers are, and significantly ahead in second place. Below that, everything else is dramatically different. The lowest is the Miami Marlins at 1.2 billion. Tampa Bay Rays 1.4 billion. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are 12 teams below 2 billion in this. So the median point of this would be somewhere in the low twos, probably. The median is distinct from average, and you're talking about statistical evaluation. The median is going to show you where most of the teams are as compared to the average, which is affected by the outlanders, which is the Yankees especially, and then followed by the Dodgers to a lesser extent. And so what it shows you here, we just went through basketball in the last show. It was, the Golden State Warriors were like over 8. The Lakers were up there. None of those teams were at below 2 billion. Baseball valuations are significantly lower than basketball and especially football. I think that's the takeaway from here. Why is another matter, but which we'll get to. But your thoughts?
Yeah, the bottom 10 really is pretty stark. I mean, you have to get to the Athletics, which is probably just because of the Vegas move. You have to get all the way to 18th from 30 to get above well, and no, not even above, to get at the 2 billion
They've
valuation
got the
mark.
A's at 2 billion. Yeah, so there's 12 teams below 2 billion, which is, Chris. I mean, I bet you you could. I bet you could value like the University of Alabama football team at close to some of these
Yeah, I
numbers.
think we've even looked at those in the past. Yeah, people have done it. I mean, it's kind of a construct because it's not really
We
apples to
did do that, didn't
oranges.
we? I forgot
Yeah,
about that. Yeah, we did. I mean, that is the idea that baseball is worth this little is amazing to me. How, but it simultaneously shouldn't be because we've talked about this for years on this show. The way baseball revenue, the way baseball, the marketing of baseball is structured, they're doing it to themselves. One, there's no revenue sharing, so you have significant haves and
or
have-nots.
limited revenue sharing. It's not none.
True, yeah, very limited revenue sharing, and then and the way they've marketed baseball as a series of local rights offerings, and regional, they all practically revel in the regional nature of baseball. That has depressed valuations of a team as comparison to other sports.
Yeah, you see where you've got this haves and have-nots where you see a significant a significant difference, as you mentioned, between 1 and 2, and then you go 2 to 8, and then you go kind of below 10 or 12, and it falls off a cliff. So like we have a variety of different kinds of haves and have-nots even in the list.
Yeah, I mean, and the Yankees have this valuation for a lot of factors. They're in New York. They have the most history of any baseball team. They own their own stadium.
They own their own network.
They
That's the
own their
key.
own network. The Dodgers are up there, yes, because they're an historic franchise, but they've got probably the best, short of the Yankees owning their own network. They probably have the best local broadcast rights of any team in baseball. I know I don't even need to debate. They absolutely do. They make way, 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 way more than any other team. Um, and that's why their valuation is so high, even compared to other historic franchises like the Red Sox. They're more than a billion ahead of the Red Sox. 1.3 billion ahead of the Cubs. So it's not just an historic thing. This is based on revenue. So it's no accident. Here's some revenue numbers. Yankees revenue 705 million. EBITDA, which is interest before earning taxes and what's the depreciation, I think. No, debt.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, 7 billion. The Dodgers EBITDA is up to 10, 3 billion more than the Yankees, and the revenue is almost the same, 705 versus 701 billion. Then it falls off a cliff after this. The Red Sox are third, 514 million in revenue. Chicago Cubs 528 million. So all the revenue is lower. The Dodgers revenue again is so high because of their broadcast. Yeah, their broadcast rights. But it's just stunning to me how far this falls off the cliff. Because you pick the worst I forget what the lowest basketball rev
I
NBA
think it was in the
valuation was.
2.53
Yeah, something like
range.
that. Yeah, I agree. And that here, like 2.5 is up to 12. St. Louis Cardinals 2.55 billion. That is how far behind baseball is from their principal competitor, which is the NBA.
Here, I'm looking real quick so we can
Oh yeah,
just.
we're checking. Okay. Um, it's going to take, I think, a fundamental shift in a lot of things for baseball to make this up. I think they need to have some revenue sharing model. We're going to talk about a salary cap later. And listen, the reason football is so far ahead is because of revenue sharing.
All right, just so we can
Go
close the
ahead.
loop.
Yeah.
And this is also CNBC. So same formula or what, same news organization putting the valuations together. So, apples to apples in terms of their methodology. The lowest valuated NBA franchise, this is also 2025, so also same year, is the Memphis Grizzlies at 3.2.
3.2 puts us at sixth in the Major League Baseball at the Philadelphia Phillies. 3.2 billion.
Right. East Coast, longtime franchise. Yeah. So now we have sort of one sale to kind of stress test this against, which is the Minnesota Twins, who've been on sale now for, I think, a while. Like this is one of those sales that's dragging on, at least, or the family has, kind of put their intentions up. Now we should start off by. I want to start this off. The Polid family, the patriarch, I think, has since passed, and that's part of the problem. You're dealing with nephews and sons trying to figure this out to not much success, and finally, probably wiser heads in the family said, "Let's just go ahead and put this
Who
up
would
for
have
sale."
shot? Who would have thought shock or that the descendants are not as smart as the patriarch?
And Carl Poland, died in 2009, so not just yesterday. He bought old Carl, R.I.P. Bought the Twins in 1984 for $44 million.
Jesus.
Now, the last offer that they've gotten, which they turned down, um, was 1.5, and this Michael Ozanian valuations list that we're talking about has them at 1.65, and they're looking for 1.7. So there, here we see they have an offer on the table for 1.5 billion. By the way, the valuations, up to date, the one list we're talking about is 1.65, and they're looking for 1.7. So you can kind of, there's our real talk range.
And they're not. It's one the buyer and the seller are not that far off, and so that really is the valuation that's around that.
Yeah, it's pretty dead. Yeah.
They're quibbling over what 12%, something like that, a little more than 10%, basically, because they're 200. They're about 1.5 to 200 million off, and so 1.5 is about exactly 10%. So that is the real value of the team. They're kind of quibbling over numbers a little bit here.
They're arguing about the difference, or whatever, they're haggling, let's call it, about, where the eventual sale price is going to be, which may be 2 or 3 times the original sale price in 1984. So they're arguing for
More than
that margin is like, yeah. So it's hysterical.
It's more like 5 times,
Yeah.
4 or 5 times, not five. It'd be 3 or 4 times. But yeah, anyway. And by the way, I don't know. We don't know if we're pronouncing this name right. It's Pohlad, is Pohlad. So if we're mispronouncing that, sorry. Um, and so Front Office Sports had a story about this. That's where we saw about the Twins, the memo, which we're quoting all the time. This says Twins attendance plunges as sale drags on by Ben Horney and David Rumsey. Now they mentioned that Monday night, which would have been this past Monday, the game against the Mets drew 10,240 fans. That is the number of tickets sold, not even the number of players or fans in the stadium, which is going to be less. That is as bad as can be. You will see college football, the lowest levels of college football will attract more than 10,000 fans. I think this sort of thing, and so that's why the valuation is down to between 1.5 and 1.7 billion. This is why. So the question would be, what can they do about it? And we're going to lead to another story in this as a result. One thing they could do, two things they could do is put a salary cap in place and greater amounts of revenue sharing. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they got to fix the base between this and the media rights for regional national streaming being an ongoing issue. There's some fundamental things. Now, this is also, like I said, there's half glass full. There's all kind. In fact, we'll even get to the sort of the positive view of this and within the story about salary cap, no salary cap. But it's clear that there are sort of fundamental how the business of Major League Baseball operates things that must get sorted. You see some of the biggest, you see representatives, top tier executives, not just, nobodies, at the Dodgers, at the Mets, talking about the need for greater competitive parity. Now, these are, I think, what, Dodgers, we just said 2, and I think the Mets were 6th or 7th on the list or something there. So we're seeing the big dogs acknowledging that their overall league and product is harmed by the lack of real competitive balance. And you need these kind of, I'm sorry, players, labor union here, you need 21st century operating models for this to be successful. And Major League Baseball is addicted to a 20th century model.
So, as a good um as a good example of the problem here, the Dodgers signed Shohei Ohtani to a 10-year, $700 million contract, and Juan Soto got signed by, was it the Mets?
Mets.
Mets, $725 million.
With most
Seven,
of that up front, most of that paid out in the next 5 years.
yeah, and the Dodgers paid
Like they
Ohtani.
spread the pain. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a Bobby Bonilla contract. Um, but those two contracts or more than 50% of the value of the entire team for about 10 Major League Baseball franchises. Think about that, one player. And so, the Dodgers especially have spent, I mean, a truckload, an unbelievable amount of money on salary. They're way, 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 way above the luxury tax. Baseball has had a luxury tax in place, and what it basically means is you hit one number for your salary cap figure, for your payroll figure, you have to pay a tax to baseball, which gets distributed. Then there's a couple different levels of it. The Dodgers just have so much money that they don't even care. They just blown way past it. They are doing. There is absolutely no parity whatsoever. The teams, the Marlins, the Rays, the Pirates, they can't even hope to compete like that. It's almost varsity versus junior varsity. It's bad for the game, and I think when the Dodgers owner has said this, and he's absolutely right. You have to have greater parity, otherwise you're just going to lose interest. I mean, the Twins can't compete with the Yankees and the Dodgers, and that's why people aren't interested. They need to make it a more competitive game overall.
Yeah, and what people forget when you talk about a salary cap, that also comes with a salary floor,
Right.
which would immediately force additional spending, probably for the bottom third of the league. So it immediately also means that those teams have to spend more just to hit the floor. And also I think the players apparently are already digging in their heels. So we basically had owners and the league saber rattle that they think it's got to be time for a salary cap and more revenue share in the league, right? So they've said that's their starting. They're starting to basically say where their starting position is now, even a year and a half out. And the players digging in their heels. They've consolidated their backup funds. They think they have the war chest. Which is basically they get from licensing. They agreed to pay 100%. They all their like baseball card, those kind of licensings, which go to the players union. They voted to take no payouts from that, so they are stashing money. So that means they're getting ready, and their line of the sand is free market rules for player talent, and nothing is going to budge them off that. I think it just doesn't make sense. I think they're actually hurting their players. The other factor of Otani slash Soto contracts is that they wildly balloon. Get back to average and mean. They're so astronomically ahead, and then maybe you put the next 7 or 8 guys in there, and you put them in top 10 in a
There's more that
capsule.
are, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. There's
Right.
several
So you,
players.
you take the top 10. That
The median is drastically different than the
Yeah,
average.
your seventh inning, relief pitcher is so far down a salary scale that things like a floor, mandatory spending, salary caps that then, don't let you, spend $700 million on a player for 4 year, at that point I'd call that a rental, for God's sake. So it means more money gets distributed through the system. I think the players are. I think they really are outdated in their thinking, and I think it's actually holding firm to this is going to be is going to is has a chilling effect on basically your bottom 50% of players in the league. I think if they went to something that was more structured and had cap, had floor, made sense, was more growth oriented, at least 50% of the players are going to see increases in salary.
Yeah, I think this is very short-sighted by the players union. And now this is not new, okay? The baseball has wanted to put a salary cap in place, which to your point, the key to that is there's a floor that comes with it. Because if you look at the payroll of some of these teams, the bottom, like the right side of the Dodgers infield is way more than the entire payroll of some of these teams. And I'm not being I haven't looked at numbers, but I'm not really being hyperbolic about it. I
No,
mean, that is the case. Um, the players union has fought this for years and years and years and years, probably 20 years.
I think more. It's more like 45.
Yeah, it may be right. A long, long,
Because the
long.
NBA's had a salary cap since 85. The NFL's had a salary cap since 94.
Right. And look at what it's done to NFL, especially. There's parity. Every team is competitive, in and out of competitiveness. In baseball, they have had a lot of teams win the World Series, but it's a lot of teams that are in the special few, and you haven't had any rise out of the depths, out of nowhere
I
to
think the
win,
article that we
except
looked
for
at,
the Rays won one, and then they immediately sold off the entire team, and there was one more that did, and that was it.
I think it was like something like 10 of the last 12 World Series winners were in top 10 in player
That's
spending.
exactly right. You can go through it. Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Astros are up there. By the way, so there's another story here. CNBC again. Major League Baseball weighs a salary cap as potential lockout looms in 2026 by Alex Sherman and Lillian Rizzo, which again we've said both of them before, dated April 10th. Um, and they're the first thing I highlight here is that they've never had a salary cap. Um, the idea that the players are, preparing for a lockout now is so dumb. If they really, you said it exactly right. It's what they're doing is they're hurting the bottom 50% of their players to protect the top few. And and they're not really playing the long game here. I got news for them. Lower team valuation and lower team revenue means less salary spent. Okay. Ultimately, they're not protecting rich owners; they'd be protecting themselves, and they need to agree to a cap. It doesn't sound like they're going to. Yeah, all this money they're raising, it's so they can pay players during a lockout.
Yeah.
That's what the money's for. It's just dumb.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I think it's standing too rigid on an ideal rather than designing a system that's going to work for the health of the game and ultimately for players. And I think traditionally the reason why they don't have this and the reason they have this kind of milquetoast version since the last collective bargaining agreement is because the owners were as steadfast about revenue sharing. I think the owners have moved further away from their position on revenue sharing
I
than the
do too.
players have on max free agency. And so I think that's what kind of kept this balance in place, that neither side was ready to budge for a long time. But I think the owners are way closer to caving on their quote unquote ideals.
Now, the NFL. I don't ask me percentages, but the NFL, most of the revenue is shared. Um, NFL teams do not have the right to locally market games. They do keep most of the local marketing revenue, but all of the national revenue is shared. There is a floor and a cap. Yes, you could not ask the Florida Marlins to spend way more than their revenue on payroll, but you put a floor and a cap in at the same time as you dramatically increase revenue sharing, then everybody could do it. There's a way to do this. It's not just a one step thing. It's a two-step thing. You have to share national rights, national media rights money, and then put a floor in. If you do that, I think it would be a much better game.
Now, where the league is flat footed here is their media rights maze
Yes,
and problems.
absolutely. They've
So they
created
do
their
need to
own.
kind of sort that, because you have to figure, like, because you need to know what that revenue is sharing, and you have to have a new understanding of what that revenue means. And, we know Major League Baseball would love to step in and just, I mean, they would love to control way more of that than they do now. And the implosion of RSNs is maybe helping to get there. But that is something that they're going to have to sort out to move towards this kind of model.
Well, that's what I said earlier. It's the idea they've marketed the league for since almost its existence as a series of regionally oriented franchises. Basketball isn't like that. Yes, there's local fans, but the league is marketed on a national level. And you're going to see, pick your team, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns on ESPN on a random Tuesday or TNT or wherever it's supposed to be. For the most part, that's not how baseball is marketed. Baseball is marketed individually as regionally oriented teams, with the exception of a handful: Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, Dodgers. That's really it.
Yeah.
In
Other
terms of the,
franchises will spike for a couple years, like Houston,
yeah,
but not longevity.
right. Football learned this years ago. Basketball learned this. Basketball has its problems, but they've got the marketing settled. And at baseball, it's the owners need to come to this realization sooner rather than later. And I think some of them, you cited the Dodgers owner, realizes it. There's probably others. Um, I think part of the problem is there's a lot of old families that own these franchises that are just kind of stuck in the mud with this.
The easiest way to understand why the top 10% of owners understand they need a better competitive system. They play 182 games, right? This is a Major League Baseball season.
182, yeah.
They have stadiums to fill. They don't, they can't be a laugher. That's a lot of home games against dogs. You know what I mean? In July.
I almost think baseball plays too many games.
Oh, I think they all. Well, now I maybe make the argument with the NFL with the 17 and 18. All the leagues play too many games. I mean, they'll never go. I mean, it'll never go back they all play.
I think the
games.
NFL is getting to the point where they're oversaturating the market as well.
Yeah, it's too much. But
you said that's another story. I don't want to get into it, but the NFL can't play on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, and have it still be special.
We'll have to see. The stove is going to have to burn their hand at some point.
Yeah, right. And so baseball, you just have a never ending. It never ends. There's games constantly. I just think it's not viewed as special enough when their games are all
and they're just not even competitive. Like
right.
You're bringing in like a AAA team or whatever.
Oh, look, the Dodgers are going to play this backup JV team from Atlanta or whatever.
Right, for 3 straight nights, or 3 out of 5 nights in August.
Right. And they've got a team of all-stars, and that's just, yeah, I'm a Dodger fan, okay, but I mean, from a baseball at large, that's not good for the game.
Yeah, that's not entertaining.
No.
An interesting market to look at this difference between the NBA and Major League Baseball here is actually Milwaukee. So you have like a constant dregs Milwaukee Brewers, and you have a Milwaukee Bucks who are highly relevant. Now they're highly relevant because they have one superstar player, but they can afford a superstar player, who they've signed long term. So you see here's same market, right? All the other factors about having a professional sports team in Milwaukee are the same. And one is a complete dregs, and the other, is able to compete and has actually even won an NBA championship.
Yeah, I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks were 48-34 this year. Competitive. And yeah, they've got one of the best superstars in the game. The Milwaukee Brewers never do anything.
Same market, same everything else, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. So just look at those two teams if you want, like, kind of to zero in on a compare contrast.
I'm looking at so the Milwaukee Brewers are decent this year, 11-10. But I can promise you they're not going to make a splash.
Yeah, it's so early in Major League Baseball.
Yes.
And here's the other number: Milwaukee Bucks, which are bottom 2/3, but they're the 19th valuated team in the NBA. But they're still valued at 4.1, which would put them top 6 in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wonder how much of that valuation is Gian. What's this? How do you pronounce that guy's name?
I can't remember. The Greek Freak. That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, the Gian something Greek Freak. Some of that. But the idea that and we got to move on here, but he has stayed with Milwaukee.
Yeah, they could afford to sign him because of the structure of the league.
That is exactly what I was about to say. If he had been a baseball player drafted into the Milwaukee Bucks, I can promise you the Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox would have rated him a long time ago.
Yeah.
Exactly like what happened to Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. And Juan Soto.
Yeah. And a bunch of others. Mookie Betts, all kinds of players.
All of them. So we'll go to the problems with regional baseball to maybe a success story in regional baseball, and that is the
Savannah Bananas.
Yeah, the Savannah Bananas. Thank you, Steve.
What is the
which is
Savannah Bananas, Chris? Why don't you enlighten us?
they are basically a barnstorming, exhibition only baseball team that has it's basically taking a minor league franchise and putting them on the road and barnstorming and taking all the kind of like, and upping the gamemanship and making it entertainment first, right? It's a little bit the WWE model. Now, I think they can, compete
It's real
more.
game though. It's not fake
Yes,
baseball. Yeah.
right, but they're mandated to not last longer than 2 hours. Like to me, that's where you start. Okay, so it's a construct. It's yes, they're playing out there, but they have to play within entertainment rule book.
Now, I had never heard of the Savannah Bananas before last week, and I saw ESPN did some sort of documentary on this team. Um, and what's the guy's name, Chris? Well, while you're looking up, so the Athletic had a story. ESPN to broadcast 10 Savannah Bananas
Yeah,
games
it's
this summer on
Mark
the
Julio and Dan Chonoff.
right April 15th. That's the writers of the story. Um, and so yes, this is kind of a barnstorming thing. They're not in a league. They have all kind of crazy rules. There's a guy on stilts that plays on stilts. He's at the plate on like 5 foot tall stilts. All kinds of crazy. There's the team sings beforehand, and it's a whole big event. The owner dresses up in yellow, hence the Savannah Banana thing. Um, there's all kinds of it's a show, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes in with it. And this is not just some small thing. They're playing Fenway, Camden Yards. They're playing at the Clemson Tigers Stadium.
And selling it out, by the way.
Yes, it's selling it out. Um, Apparently, they are playing in football stadiums now. Tennessee Titans, Nissan Stadium, the Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where the Panthers play. Um, this is stuff that the Miami Marlins could only dream of in terms of interest. We just told you that the Minnesota Twins drew 10,000 people. That's a terrible night for the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah, right. They wouldn't show up for that.
They would not. They would not. And these are not Major League Baseball players. These are, for the most part, according to the documentary, it's not in the story, but in the documentary, they're like college players. That level, they're not. This is not elite baseball. It's just entertainment, and it's fun, and it's worked.
Um, I kind of knew about their phenomenon because this former, real nerd indie rock guy went on to have a later career in filmmaking, and he was, I think, the director, if not very top of the creative team behind this ESPN series. So I've been sort of following along because he, documents what he's working on. So I kind of made me a couple years ago aware that this team even existed. The guy's name is Michael Galinsky, is the filmmaker. And he's a rumor picks on Instagram if you want to follow along. But so I've been sort of aware of them, and the best comp, which is not really even culturally relevant right now, hasn't been probably for 15, 20 years, is the Harlem Globetrotters. It's the same sort of mentality. How do you do sports as entertainment, barnstorming? You build a brand outside of the professional league construct, and you let it play out. And they basically bring fun to the ballpark. So it's, we often talked about, and if anyone is familiar with minor league baseball, those ballparks would do all kinds of fun things, giveaways, theme nights, right? Because they have to keep it fun. So this is like a traveling team that plays basically an entertainment first style and brings a lot of that kind of carnival barker kind of event type mentality to the in-person experience.
I think the Globetrotters are a perfect example. And the Globetrotters, both the Globetrotters and the Generals would tell you that they're playing real basketball every day. Like the Generals are trying, it's not a tank. And that's pretty much exactly what the Savannah Bananas are doing. It's interesting. We just talked, 2 weeks ago, a couple shows ago, about ESPN scaling back its baseball coverage. Remember this?
Yeah, now they're gonna air 10 games.
10 games of some random independent league, not even any random independent team instead of Major League Baseball. They would rather have the Savannah Bananas on TV than the Pittsburgh Pirates. What does that tell you? It
Yeah.
tells you there's a problem, a huge problem. There is, I don't know what I saw, Chris. Was it was it a docu series they did? I thought it
Yeah,
was
it was a docu-series. Yeah.
okay. So yeah, that was I saw this. You could probably dredge it up on streaming, I would assume somewhere if you want it, but it was called Banana Land. That was the name of the docu series. It's fascinating how much success that this team has had. I love it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this guy's Instagram, the filmmaker's Instagram, and they sold out for 4 games, 60,000 seat Tampa Bay Bucks Stadium, football stadium, NFL stadium. Um,
The Tampa Bay Rays could never hope to do that.
yeah, no. And they also, it's because it's about a show. They, banana, all the different ways you can play around with that. They
It's the
dress
guy,
in
the
pure
lead.
yellow.
It's it's a carnival barker who's leading this thing. This owner is like a carnival barker.
Yeah, and they're not. And I read in that story about ESPN broadcasting games, that also they're not paying anything for that. That's not one of these, because this is just they can't get that level of marketing, the banana team. So they'll just say, if you want to broadcast it, go ahead. You don't have to pay us a dime to put it on your
They're
airwaves.
probably paying something, but it's certainly not a ton of
Licensing
money.
cost or whatever.
Yeah, it's not a lot. They're not doing it for free.
Right. But not much,
It's a hell of a
not
lot
much more
cheaper
than
than
free.
the Cubs and the Yankees. I can tell you that much.
Right. And for event TV, they'll probably draw comparable audiences.
Absolutely.
So there you go. So everyone, now I was already reading like comment chains and different things, and everyone's already you know, it's over, because it's like a niche thing, right? Like it's got its own like kind of folk culture. But if it goes to mainstream, then all the diehards like that's over. It's reached, it's crested. It's only on decline. The magic is gone.
Maybe we'll see. In the
Yeah.
meantime, the Savannah Bananas are doing significantly better than like half of the Major League Baseball teams out there.
We'll see. One thing would be interesting is when and if, and maybe it's more if they bring in long in the tooth Major League Baseball players to join the team, right? Like if there's like, or if they break off into, maybe there is like a two touring teams. There's the kind of college age, kind of minor league version that is the sort of original, and maybe there's like a Savannah Bananas that travel with old Major League Baseball players.
Maybe.
You'll
I
see
mean,
that's if the business model grows, you'll see ways to monetize it.
yeah, we'll see. Because part of me says that's going a bit too far with it. Part of the charm is that they're a bunch of nobodies.
Yeah, but we know the culture loves to beat the charm out of
Yeah. Oh,
things.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like Hollywood. You're going to make 8 sequels to a movie that seriously
Yeah.
deserve two.
So, yeah,
See, like
which
the Fast and the Furious, for example.
9 Savannah
It started
Bananas.
out. The Fast and Furious started out as a group of people in a like a streetcar thing that's turned into an international spy ring. It's just ridiculous, and that's what's going to happen to this, maybe.
Or you create 2 or 3 more of these kind of traveling virtual teams,
Yeah,
and then that road show is those 4 teams battling each other across the country.
could be that.
Yeah. So we'll see. So if you start to track this and it starts to become into your consciousness, you'll see that there is obviously a revenue stream that they want to ride till the end.
Yep, until ride it into the ground until it dies.
Now, Steve, as we get ready to wrap up, I wanted to clean up a few minor errors in my
Okay.
Young family. It was George Young is the older brother. His
Okay.
name.
I've heard of George Young. I didn't know who you were talking about. Was
Yeah.
Alex
So
Young?
George Young, he was
Yeah.
in the Easy. Everything else I said is correct. I just had the name the name incorrect. And actually, the Easybeats George Young Wikipedia pages, even the George Young Wikipedia page is pretty long, and he definitely was very instrumental in those early days of ACDC and basically managed them to their international fame. But the other kind of sad thing is that George Young is in fact deceased. He died at the age of 70, and only 3 weeks before Malcolm. So
Oh,
the two brothers died within a month, within the same month in 2017.
there's still an endless supply of guitar playing Youngs.
Yeah.
There was. And I sprung the ACDC thing on Chris, so forgive him for the error.
Yeah,
You
I
didn't
only
know
got the
we were
name
going to
wrong.
talk
Everything
about
else I had was right. So he's Pretty fascinating. So I will put these relevant ACDC Wikipedia pages in the show notes. So if you want to go deeper, you can on the fabulous rock and roll young Australian Youngs.
And I will have an ACDC report on the next
That's
show.
right. So there we go. We'll continue the theme in the next couple of weeks. Steve, even by the time this goes up, the draft will have not happened yet. So promote your draft coverage.
We are releasing the Hogstie this week, a day early on Wednesday to cover the draft. We will cover it during the draft, and we will have write-ups, of course, of all the draft picks for the Washington Seawards, as we do every year. And that is available on the show is available on every streaming service, and you can read all of our written coverage on thehogstie.com.
There you go. And we will see you in 2 weeks.